The screaming started right at 8:17 a.m. The exact moment Bethany Kruger realized her pristine white Mercedes was being hauled off by a tow truck while half the neighborhood stood outside recording the spectacle. Just 3 hours earlier, that same woman had taken a crowbar to my brand new Camaro. I can still hear the sickening crunch of shattering glass and the metallic scrape across paint I'd spent 2 years of overtime paying for. $40,000 worth of dreams reduced to a glittering heap of shards in my own driveway. But here's what that whole tyrant didn't know. While she was busy destroying my car, I was busy dismantling her entire life. Bank statements, forged signatures, embezzled HOA funds. I had everything. And in 12 minutes, the police were going to knock on her door with a felony fraud warrant. So, what would you do if some power-drunk Karen wrecked everything you'd worked for? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story of justice travels. Because what happened next didn't just change my life, it transformed our entire community. Let's rewind a bit. My name's Darius, and 6 months ago, I was just an ordinary guy trying to rebuild his life after the worst year I'd ever faced. 52 years old, freshly divorced, working as an electrician in suburban Dallas. My ex-wife got the house, the dog, and half my retirement. After the dust settled, I scraped together enough cash to buy a modest ranch home in Willowbrook Estates, one of those neat, identical neighborhoods where every lawn looks cloned and every smile hides gossip. I thought it would be peaceful. I was wrong. With what little I had left from the divorce, I bought my dream a 2020 Ford Camaro SS in Rally Red. It cost me every last cent, but that car symbolized freedom. I'll never forget that first drive home, windows down, warm Texas air mixing with the smell of fresh leather. That 455 horsepower V8 rumbling beneath me like caged thunder. For the first time since the divorce, I felt alive again. That feeling lasted 3 days. Then came Bethany Kruger, the self-crowned queen of Willowbrook Estates. Picture the textbook suburban control freak, flawless blonde bob that never moved, designer business casual outfits that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, and a white Mercedes she worshipped like a temple relic. Her mansion-sized home dominated the cul-de-sac, a monument to vanity, complete with a lawn so perfect it looked machine-installed. Bethany had ruled the HOA for 6 years, and she ran it like her personal kingdom. The harassment began almost instantly. On my 4th day in the neighborhood, I found a notice in my mailbox. Apparently, my black mailbox violated the community's aesthetic harmony. I needed a brown one. The swap cost me $89 for a functionally identical piece of metal. Then came the lawn citations, every Tuesday morning, like clockwork. I'd hear that sharp snap of paper being stuffed into my mailbox. Grass exceeds approved length by 3/4 of an inch, $25 fine. Oil stains on driveway, $50 fine. Garden hose not properly stored, another $25. Each time I caught her watching from her kitchen window, arms crossed, smug grin plastered on her face. I could feel anger boiling just under my skin. But when she set her sights on my Camaro, that's when the real war began. That vehicle is not appropriate for our community's standards, she declared during my first whole meeting, her voice dripping with entitlement. The room reeked of burnt coffee and disinfectant, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry hornets. Bethany sat behind a folding table like a judge handing down sentences, flanked by 4 board members, middle-aged yes men nodding along to her every word. We uphold aesthetic expectations here in Willowbrook Estates, she continued, locking her icy blue eyes on me. Sports cars project an undesirable image. Undesirable image. My legally parked car in my own driveway offended her sense of order. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry hornets. Bethany sat behind a folding table like a judge handing down sentences, flanked by 4 board members, middle-aged yes men nodding along to her every word. We uphold aesthetic expectations here in Willowbrook Estates, she continued, locking her icy blue eyes on me. Sports cars project an undesirable image. Undesirable image. My legally parked car in my own driveway offended her sense of order. Armed with proof, I returned for the next meeting. The room felt smaller and more hostile, thick with the electricity of an imminent showdown. I laid out my findings calmly and methodically, demonstrating how her citations contradicted our own governing documents. Bethany watched with the slow, patient stare of a predator eyeing injured prey. When I finished, she leaned back and said the line that changed everything. "Some people just don't understand that rules exist for a reason, Darius. Maybe you'd be happier in a different kind of neighborhood." The racial insinuation hung in there like smoke. The board voted 4-1 to uphold every citation. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about parking or curb appeal. It was about maintaining control and putting a new, undesirable resident back in his place. Bethany Kruger had declared war on the wrong electrician. 1 week after that humiliating meeting, I went out to my driveway and felt my stomach drop. Deep, deliberate scratches streaked the driver's side of my Camaro, jagged gouge sliced through paint to bare metal, like furious scars across red skin. The morning should have smelled of honeysuckle from the neighbor's fence, but instead the air reeked of metal and the sour taste of rage. Whoever did it had used a key or screwdriver and dragged it from headlight to taillight with surgical intent. This wasn't random vandalism. It was a message. I called the police and fought to keep my voice steady while Officer Martinez filled out the report with the enthusiasm of someone taking down a parking complaint. "Probably kids," he offered, even though the precision of the damage said otherwise. "No witnesses, no cameras, nothing we can do." The repair estimate made me physically ill, $2,800 for work my deductible wouldn't touch. But Bethany had made a crucial miscalculation. She had underestimated a divorced electrician with nothing left to lose, to decades of troubleshooting experience, and too much time on his hands. That evening, while installing security lights for a nervous homeowner across town, a job that taught me how motion sensors and camera angles interact, I got a terse text from my next-door neighbor, Martha Hensley. Martha, 73, and living alone since her husband's death, had the keenest eyes on the block. Her message was short but heavy. "Can you come over? I need to tell you something important." Martha's living room smelled of lavender potpourri and old secrets. She closed the curtains before taking my hand with hands that trembled. "I saw who scratched your car, honey," she whispered, glancing toward the window as if Bethany might be eavesdropping through the walls. Brown. Midnight. Bethany's boy Trevor. The image of a 17-year-old skulking near my driveway with something metal in his hand made my pulse roar. "Will you testify?" I asked. Martha's face folded like wet tissue paper. "I can't, Darius. She'll destroy me." Last month, she cited Mrs. Peterson over bird feeders, right after Peterson questioned landscaping expenses at a board meeting. Now there's a for sale sign in her yard. The pattern snapped into focus like a clean circuit diagram. Bethany neutralized threats by making life unbearable until the target fled. But unlike Martha and Mrs. Peterson, I wasn't going anywhere. While Bethany likely believed she'd count me, I was already working out a response. 20 years fixing electrical problems had taught me a useful lesson. When someone tries to cut your power, you don't just repair the break, you upgrade the whole system. The next morning I drove to Best Buy and bought the best dashcam setup they had: front and rear cameras, motion activation, night vision, cloud backup. From my electrical work I knew motion-activated cameras on private property are legal in Texas, and footage is admissible in court so long as cameras aren't aimed directly into neighbors' windows. A lesson my divorce attorney had drilled into me during the custody fight. Document everything, Darius. Your word against theirs counts for nothing without proof. I spent the weekend running electrical conduit and installing the camera system with the same exacting care I use on commercial projects. The metallic click of screwdrivers against mount brackets sounded like I was loading ammunition for the battle ahead. Each camera was concealed from the street but recorded every inch of my driveway in crisp 4K. Bethany's reaction arrived like clockwork Monday morning. A city code officer with her last name Brad Kruger, probably a cousin, showed up at my door clutching a clipboard and wearing the weary look of someone doing family favors. "We got a complaint about surveillance invading neighbors' privacy," he drawled. I walked him around the property and pointed out every camera, all on my land, and only at my vehicles. None directed at neighbors' windows. Brad found no violation but told me he'd keep an eye on it and added under his breath that he'd be back when Bethany told him to. That afternoon brought a breakthrough. Martha called, her voice trembling. "There's more, honey." She told me 3 other families had moved away in the last 2 years after Bethany targeted them: the Hendersons, the Washingtons, and the young Garcias with their baby. The pattern followed the same playbook: sudden citations for trivial infractions, anonymous complaints to city departments, insurance companies receiving bizarre safety reports about their properties, pushed back against Bethany, and the harassment escalated until leaving seemed the only option. Then Martha dropped the crucial detail: the prior treasurer, Edgar Williams, had questioned expenses before he left. Bethany hit him with supposed roof structural violations that 3 independent contractors called fabricated. My electrician's mind started seeing the circuit behind it all, and Bethany wasn't just power drunk. She was covering something big enough that she'd ruin lives to keep it hidden. Edgar, wherever he'd gone, had the keys to bring her down. That night I sat in the garage organizing evidence while the scent of motor oil mixed with resolve. I had no idea my new cameras were about to capture something that would flip this whole fight. 3 nights later at 2:17 a.m., my phone flooded with motion alerts. Half asleep, expecting a raccoon, I pulled up the live feed and nearly threw my phone across the room. There, crouched beside my Camaro like a deranged suburban saboteur, was Bethany Kruger herself, not her kid, not some anonymous vandal. The HOA president was cutting lines into my rear quarter panel with a landscaping edger from the community shed. Her immaculate nails gripped the tool, her $200 athleisure gleamed under the streetlight, and that gaudy 3-carat wedding ring flashed as she worked with surgical focus. The metallic rasp sounded through my bedroom like the devil scratching a chalkboard. Each gouge was calculated to inflict the most financial pain, and she seemed to relish it. In the infrared footage I could actually see her grin as she wrecked thousands of dollars of custom paint. Every instinct told me to charge out and grab her by that perfect blonde bob, but my divorce lawyer's voice kept me frozen. Emotions ruin evidence. Darius. Stay calm. Record everything. Let them hang themselves. So I lay awake and recorded a felony in real time, watching a 50-year-old HOA president vandalize property with the dedication of a professional thief. The footage was airtight, but I still had an obstacle. Local cops treated neighborhood disputes like radioactive waste, especially when the accused hosted the annual HOA barbecue and had the mayor on speed dial. I needed nuclear-level proof before I acted. Bethany escalated by certified mail the next afternoon, the kind of petty bureaucratic venom HOA letters excel at: emergency violation notice, unauthorized vehicle modifications detected. Aftermarket exhaust violates noise ordinance per section 4.7b. Return the vehicle to factory specs, or remove it within 48 hours, or face immediate professional towing at owner's expense plus administrative fees. The audacity was staggering. She was trying to take my car by paper after failing to ruin it by vandalism. The letter smelled of desperation, cheap perfume, and pure malice. While Bethany thought her trap was closing, I was about to be handed the device that would obliterate her operation. That evening Martha nervously showed up at my door with something that looked classified. "There's someone you need to meet," she whispered, glancing around like we were arranging a secret rendezvous. "Edgar Williams is back in town, and he's been waiting for someone like you." We met Edgar in a dingy coffee shop 30 minutes away, where over-roasted coffee matched the bitter flavor of corruption. Edgar was a gaunt man in his 60s who looked worn down by the burden of dangerous knowledge. "She didn't just steal from the community," Edgar began, his hands trembling as he opened a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. "Bethany Kruger has been embezzling from the HOA for 3 years, fake invoices, shell companies, and equipment orders that never existed. We're talking at least $45,000. My blood ran cold as he spread the paperwork across the sticky coffee shop table: bank statements, forged contractor invoices, and payments to phantom businesses. The smoking gun was a business registration for Willowbrook Maintenance Solutions filed under Bethany's maiden name, Bethany Morrison, with her home address listed as the company's headquarters. Every month, Edgar said quietly. She funnels between $500 and $2,000 through bogus landscaping contracts. The timing matches her Mercedes payments perfectly. She's been funding her luxury life with stolen home money and bullying anyone who gets close to the truth. But the part that truly ignited my anger was what came next. Edgar had already tried to expose her. I went to the police, the state attorney general, even the local news, he explained. That's when the harassment began. Suddenly, my roof needed $30,000 in emergency repairs, according to inspectors she handpicked. My homeowner's insurance got canceled after anonymous complaints about foundation damage that didn't exist. Bethany wasn't just a control freak, she was a criminal mastermind using her whole position like a medieval weapon to crush dissent and protect her income stream. But she'd made one fatal mistake. She targeted someone with nothing left to lose and the technical skill to catch her in the act. Edgar slid the thick folder across the table. I kept everything, he said. Bank records, fake invoices, contractor correspondence, all of it. I've been waiting 3 years for someone strong enough to finish what I started. That night, under the harsh glow of my kitchen lights, I spread out Edgar's evidence. The papers whispered like promises of justice. Bethany had built herself a suburban crime empire. But now, she'd handed me the keys to bring it down. Tomorrow, she expected me to roll over, surrender my car, and disappear quietly. Instead, I was preparing to obliterate her entire operation, and my cameras were going to capture every glorious second of her downfall. I set 3 alarms for 6 o'clock a.m. for the first time in months. Went to sleep smiling. Morning arrived crisp and cold, the kind of October air that smelled of burning leaves and impending retribution. I sipped black coffee on my porch, watching steam rise from the mug like incense to the gods of justice, when Officer Rodriguez's patrol car crunched into my driveway. Rodriguez was a good man, mid-30s, tired eyes, the kind of cop who actually listened instead of waiting for his turn to talk. You could tell he'd mediated enough HOA disputes to recognize the scent of perfume, lies, and legal jargon. Let's see what we've got, he said, snapping photos of the gouge in my Camaro while I handed him printouts from the security footage. The images were crystal clear of Bethany, crouched by my car at 2:17 a.m., her diamond ring catching the streetlight as she carved into my paint with a community landscaping tool. Rodriguez let out a low whistle. This is solid. But here's the problem: a property damage between neighbors rarely goes anywhere unless there's serious money or blood involved. The DOT treats this stuff like couples therapy. Before I could answer, the sharp clack of designer heels on asphalt cut through the air. Bethany Kruger appeared like some manicured angel of destruction, cream-colored business suit, perfect hair, leather portfolio tucked under one arm like a weapon. Officer Rodriguez. Thank heavens, she gasped dramatically, pressing a manicured hand to her chest like a soap opera actress. I've been terrified about the escalating behavior of our troubled new resident. What followed was a masterclass in suburban deceit. Fake tears welled in her icy blue eyes as she produced photos from her portfolio, snapshots of me checking my mail, washing my car, trimming hedges, even carrying groceries. Normal, everyday actions twisted into evidence of harassment. He's been surveilling my property, she said, voice trembling with practiced fragility, taking pictures, making veiled threats. I'm honestly afraid for my safety. She paused dramatically. Last night, I saw suspicious movement around his car but was too frightened to investigate. The audacity left me speechless. She stood 15 feet from the very car she had vandalized, pretending to be the victim in a performance worthy of an award. She's stolen well over $75,000 in 3 years, Edgar said, hands shaking as he opened a manila folder so thick it could choke a horse. The proof was undeniable: phantom landscaping contracts, bogus security service invoices, equipment orders that existed only on paper, and monthly transfers to Willowbrook Property Management. A shell that provided nothing but a pipeline for whole money straight into Bethany's accounts. My hands trembled when he spread the files across the sticky coffee shop table: bank ledgers, forged contractor bills, and payments to companies that only existed on paper. The most incriminating item was a business registration for Willowbrook Maintenance Solutions. filed under Bethany's maiden name, Bethany Morrison, listing her home as the company's headquarters. Every month she funnels between $500 and $2,000 through fake landscaping contracts, Edgar whispered. The timing lines up perfectly with her Mercedes payments. She's been funding a lavish lifestyle with stolen community funds and crushing anyone who asked questions. Then Edgar revealed what tied everything together. He'd tried to blow the whistle before he filed police reports, contacted the state attorney general, even talked to the local press. That's when the retaliation began. Inspectors she controlled suddenly declared Edgar's roof in urgent need of $30,000 in repairs. Anonymous complaints led to cancellations of homeowners' policies for fabricated foundation issues. Bethany had weaponized her whole role to ruin people who threatened her cash flow. But she'd miscalculated by picking the wrong target. She went after someone with nothing left to lose and the technical skills to document wrongdoing. Edgar pushed the complete evidence bundle toward me. I kept copies of everything, he said. Bank statements, forged invoices, and correspondence with contractors who never worked here. I've been waiting 3 years for someone strong enough to finish what I started. That night I spread Edgar's files across my kitchen table under harsh fluorescent light. The papers wrestled like promises of justice. Bethany had built a perfect suburban crime ring and she had just handed me the keys to dismantle it. She expected me to hand over my car and slink away. Instead, I was planning to detonate her empire, and my security cameras would document every glorious moment. I set 3 alarms for 6 o'clock a.m. and slept with a smile for the first time in months. Morning came with crisp October air that smelled of burning leaves and impending reckoning. I sat on the porch with black coffee when Officer Rodriguez's patrol car rolled into my driveway. Rodriguez, mid-30s. Tired but fair, seemed like the sort of cop who actually listened. Let's see what we've got, he said, photographing the fresh gouges while I handed him printed clips from my cameras. The footage was unmistakable. Bethany crouched by my Camaro at 2:17 a.m., her wedding ring flashing as she methodically carved into the paint with a community landscaping tool. Rodriguez whistled low. This is solid, he admitted. But neighbor-on-neighbor property damage rarely gets prosecuted unless there's major money or someone gets hurt. The DA treats these cases like expensive therapy. Before I could answer, the sharp click of designer heels announced Bethany's arrival. She appeared like a perfectly groomed storm cream suit, immaculate hair, leather portfolio in hand. Every inch the image of suburban authority. Officer Rodriguez, thank goodness, she trilled, clutching her chest with a practiced, theatrical gasp. I've been terrified by the escalating behavior of our troubled new resident. Her performance was a masterclass in manipulation. She produced photographs me checking mail, washing the car, trimming hedges, carrying groceries, and twisted ordinary chores into proof of stalking. He's been surveilling my property, she told the officer, voice shaking with artful fragility. Taking photos, making veiled threats. I'm afraid for my safety. The audacity was staggering. She stood 15 feet from the car she had vandalized and played the victim. Rico's voice lowered when he spoke next, the menace in it more chilling than a shout. He opened a folder labeled insurance fraud documentation and explained the broader campaign Bethany had been filing false insurance claims against residents who opposed her, using her real estate license to pressure companies into dropping coverage, and coordinating fabricated inspections to destroy people's financial footing. He produced correspondence with multiple insurers, fake safety reports, forged inspection records, and organized efforts to destabilize anyone who questioned her. She'd weaponized city code enforcement, insurance companies, and contractor networks, turning civic institutions into tools for eliminating threats to her scheme. The breadth of it was staggering. Bethany hadn't simply stolen money. She had systematically ruined lives to protect her theft. Mercedes payments, home remodels, her son's private school, even country club dues, all financed with community funds taken under false pretenses. I sat, staring at documentation that could carry federal exposure: mail fraud, insurance fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, racketeering. Bethany Kruger had crafted a suburban crime syndicate hidden behind manicured lawns and HOA bylaws. So what's the plan? Rico asked, eyes shining with the grim satisfaction of a man about to collect a long overdue debt. I looked at the mountain of proof on my table and felt a cold, precise resolve settle over me. We end Bethany Kruger's reign of terror in front of the whole neighborhood, and we make sure she never hurts anyone again. My garage became a makeshift war room worthy of espionage operatives. I crawled over the cold concrete floor between evidence stations, spreading documents across every surface like a strategist mapping a dictator's downfall. Edgar's financial records covered the workbench. Rico's invoices were taped to tool cabinets like tactical plans. Insurance fraud exhibits hung from a corkboard like a timeline. The air was thick with motor oil, photocopier toner, and the metallic tang of imminent justice. At dawn, Martha arrived with coffee and the determination of someone who'd finally found her courage. I've called every household that's been targeted, she announced as she sat, sounding like a resistance leader. 15 families will testify. People aren't just angry anymore, they want action. Edgar shuffled in, clutching the briefcase that held 3 years of evidence he'd been too afraid to use. His hands trembled, but his voice now carried steel. I brought everything: bank records, canceled checks, correspondence with state investigators who buried complaints because Bethany had friends in high places. Our secret weapon pulled up at 7:00 a.m. in a sleek BMW. Attorney Sarah Kim, the legal shark renowned for tearing apart abusive HOA letters, had driven down from Dallas after Rico's call. Her first words made my chest unclench. This is the most comprehensive HOA fraud documentation I've seen. This isn't just civil violations. This is federal racketeering territory. Sarah laid out the legal strategy while spreading documents across my bench. Fraudulent liens can be challenged and removed under the Texas Property Code, she explained. And when HOA officers use the Postal Service to send fake invoices, that triggers mail fraud statutes or potential federal felonies carrying severe penalties. The plan unfolded like a military siege: simultaneous assaults on multiple fronts, criminal referrals to federal prosecutors, civil suits seeking treble damages, licensing complaints to strip her real estate credentials, and a media campaign to ensure public exposure and humiliation. There would be no time to shred evidence or run to non-extradition havens. Rico converted a corner of my garage into a professional surveillance hub for K-cameras, directional mix, and even a drone for aerial documentation. My insurer wants video for disputed claims, he said, configuring equipment with filmmaker precision. Everything the next day would be recorded in broadcast quality with synchronized audio. The tech was military grade. My electrical background reminded me that Texas is a single-party consent state, so I could legally record conversations without Bethany's knowledge. We planted backup recorders throughout the neighborhood, uploaded footage to the cloud in real time, and stored copies in 3 different states to prevent tampering. Edgar had transformed from a frightened man into a meticulous forensic accountant, teaching me audit techniques every homeowner should know. Reserve funds are legally limited to capital improvements and emergency repairs, he said, pointing to statutes. Mixing reserve and operating accounts equals embezzlement, and using community money for personal expenses breaches every fiduciary duty. The audit steps he taught were shockingly simple: demand quarterly financial statements, require contractor receipts, and verify statutory notice for board meetings. Most HOA abuse thrives because residents don't know their rights. Corrupt boards rely on that ignorance to run criminal enterprises unchecked. Rico's practical expertise added devastating tactical advantages. Legal towing requires strict procedures, clear signage, 72-hour notice, photographic documentation of violations. Skip those steps, and most HOA tows amount to outright vehicle theft. His advice was priceless. Always photograph the exact position of your car before you leave it. Record any missing or unclear signage and demand complete documentation before you pay a towing bill. The timing had to be engineered with Swiss watch accuracy. Morning rush hour would guarantee witnesses on the sidewalks. School bus routes would ensure families were present. Bethany's obsessive routine mapped from weeks of surveillance. showed she made her territorial rounds at precisely 8:15 a.m. Sarah had already looped in Channel 8's investigative reporter, Lisa Martinez, whose exposes on HOA corruption had earned 3 Emmys. Lisa would arrive with a full camera crew at 8:30. Sarah's grin promised TV gold. Stories of HOA abuse pull huge ratings, especially when you have compelling footage and a clear villain getting exposed live. Our media plan was ruthless in its simplicity. Record everything as it happened, hand journalists airtight evidence packages, and use social media to amplify the story nationally. The hashtag Willowbrook fraud was already trending locally thanks to Martha's Neighborhood Resistance Network, but the psychological angle would be the real dagger. Every move we made was meant to trigger Bethany's control issues while publicly stripping her of power in front of the people she'd terrorized. Public humiliation was her worst fear, and we intended to serve it up with a federal indictment for dessert. At 2 a.m., I stood surrounded by the tools of suburban warfare and felt a certainty I hadn't known since my divorce: total victory. By morning, Bethany Kruger's criminal empire would implode spectacularly, creating a cautionary tale that might protect other communities. Every document was secured, every witness prepped, every camera aimed for maximum impact. We weren't just going to win, we were going to make history. By 6:30 a.m., I watched from my kitchen window as Bethany's pristine little world began to fracture. She stepped outside in a spotless white bathrobe, probably worth more than many folks' monthly pay, and immediately noticed unusual activity in our normally sleepy street. Rico's enormous tow truck sat legally on the public road like a mechanical vulture, its diesel engine rumbling with restrained power. Watching her panic was almost delicious. She speed-dialed someone, likely her obedient board members, while pacing in designer slippers that had rarely touched real concrete. Through my security feed, I watched her gesture toward Rico's truck, her voice carrying across the morning with the high-strung desperation of someone realizing their perfect plan was blowing up. Within 20 minutes, an emergency board meeting had assembled in her living room like co-conspirators trying to avert a mutiny. Martha's intelligence network fed me live updates by text. 4 board members showed up. There was shouting and talk of lawyers. But as Bethany scrambled to control damage, she kept digging her own grave with each frantic move. At 7:15 a.m., she stormed out in a business suit that screamed, "I have nothing to hide," and marched straight toward Rico's truck with the swagger of someone used to getting her way. Her heels crushed the morning dew as she approached like a suburban general confronting enemy forces. "You need to move this truck immediately," she ordered, voice thick with the entitled authority that made my molars ache. "This is private property, you're trespassing." Rico climbed down from the cab with the slow calm of a man who's dealt with entitled customers for decades. He was a compact mountain of honest working coveralls, and his smile was the satisfied smirk of someone about to collect a long overdue bill. "Ma'am, I'm parked on a public street with proper documentation," he said evenly. "I'm here to collect payment for services rendered to your HOA, $3,800 in unpaid invoices." Bethany's face ran through a carousel of expressions: confusion, anger, dismissal, then straight to panic as she realized the situation didn't match any script she'd rehearsed. "That's impossible. Our treasurer handles payments. There must be an accounting error." "No error," Rico said, producing a folder thick enough to choke a horse. 18 months of legitimate towing invoices, all authorized with Bethany's signature, 0 payments received. "But here's the interesting part," Rico added. "Your whole bank records show monthly transfers to Crawford Towing Solutions. Know anything about that company?" Color drained from Bethany's face as if someone had opened a valve. Her sister's fraudulent company exposed in front of witnesses, and I could almost see the wheels turning as she calculated which federal statutes she'd just trampled. The morning air crackled with the tension of a cornered predator seeing the trap snap shut. That's when Officer Rodriguez pulled up, likely responding to Bethany's frantic 911 call about harassment and trespass. He stepped out wearing the weary look of a cop who'd rather be chasing real bad guys than refereeing suburban drama, a face that told me he remembered the vandalism report from the night before. "Morning, folks," Rodriguez said, professional and neutral. "Got a call about a disturbance. What's going on? Bethany instantly shifted into performance mode with the smoothness of a practiced con artist. Officer, this man is harassing me and blocking access to my property, she said. Hands fluttering in a practice display. I've asked him to leave repeatedly. And he's making threats about money we don't owe. Rico's reply was the measured satisfaction of a professional. He handed Rodriguez a complete documentation packet and paid invoices with Bethany's signatures. Bank statements showing payments to fraudulent vendors. And a paper trail that tied everything together. Here's correspondence that proves a pattern of deception, Martha said, thrusting documents forward. Officer, I'm simply trying to collect valid debts through lawful means. These papers show 18 months of unpaid invoices and clear signs of fraud. Rodriguez scrutinized the files with growing concern while Bethany's composed veneer crumbled like a sandcastle in a store. The morning sun seemed to spotlight every fracture in her carefully cultivated image. The real shock came when Martha reappeared holding a thick manila envelope, trailed by Edgar and 3 other neighbors who'd spent years too frightened to speak up. They approached like witnesses at a public reckoning, and Bethany's eyes widened as she realized her victims had organized. Officer Rodriguez, Martha said, her voice stronger than it had been in months. We have more documentation of financial misconduct you should see. The materials she handed over outlined insurance fraud, coordinated harassment, and systematic embezzlement issues that made Rico's billing dispute look trivial. As Rodriguez's expression shifted from routine code enforcement to serious criminal inquiry, Bethany stood motionless in her driveway, watching the empire she'd built around designer heels and bylaws collapse. The predator who'd terrorized a neighborhood was about to learn what it felt like to be prey, and this was only the beginning. By 7:45 a.m., our normally quiet street had become a chaotic tableau of diesel fumes, urgent whispers, and the intoxicating scent of justice being served. Bethany, her tailored suit beginning to wrinkle from nervous sweat, dialed frantically, clearly hoping to call in favors. From 30 feet away we could hear her plea to the mayor's office. Mayor Davidson. This is Bethany Kruger from Willowbrook Estates. I need immediate intervention. This media circus is destroying our community's reputation. She got the response no political crony could spin into rescue. A polite, firm statement that the mayor's office does not intervene in private HOA disputes. Her color drained and her hands trembled. But desperation pushed her on, turning to Officer Rodriguez. She tried intimidation masked as civic concern. Officer, you must understand if certain city officials have special arrangements with our association, this harassment could have political consequences. The implied threat hung in the air like sulfur. Rodriguez's face hardened. In one sentence she'd attempted to menace a police officer and incriminate herself. Then her chosen allies arrived like rats abandoning ship. 3 board members summoned by her emergency calls shuffled forward, suddenly eager to distance themselves from her. Secretary Jennifer Walsh, upon seeing the mountain of evidence, loudly disavowed any knowledge of the invoices, eager to avoid legal exposure. I never saw any of these, she announced to the cameras. Board member Tom Rodriguez went further, admitting he'd been told the expenses were routine and approved by prior boards, but he'd never seen contracts or receipts. The panic in his voice was almost delicious. The more the stakes rose, the quicker loyalty evaporated. Within minutes, the board Bethany handpicked was supplying testimony that undermined every one of her claims about unanimous approval and broke our procedure. Bethany's last-ditch attempt to seize the narrative was spectacularly tone-deaf. She phoned Channel 8 herself to report a coordinated campaign of harassment and terroristic threats by dangerous neighbors, not realizing she was calling the investigative team Sarah had already briefed. The distant rumble of news vans sounded like doom, not rescue. When investigative reporter Lisa Martinez stepped from her cruise van, folder in hand, it was clear she already had everything we provided. Her opening line was the kind of on-camera question that makes reputations crumble. Mrs. Kruger, would you care to respond to documented allegations that you've embezzled over $75,000 in community funds while using your position to intimidate residents into silence? Bethany's face went slack, her mouth opening and closing like a stunned fish. as high-definition cameras recorded each micro-expression of her unraveling for the evening news. The moment that truly broke her came when Edgar stepped forward, carrying his briefcase of financial proof like a suitcase full of kryptonite. "I have 3 years of bank statements showing systematic theft," he announced to the cameras with the quiet dignity of a man finally getting vindication. "This woman ruined my life to hide her crimes, and I can document every single transaction." The crowd swelled to more than 40 neighbors, many recording on their phones, as the suburban despot realized she was now ringed by witnesses, paperwork, and the consequences of her own actions. For the first time in years, the woman who had ruled by fear looked terrified. Officer Rodriguez made the call that would end her world. "Dispatch send detectives and federal investigators to Willowbrook Estates immediately. We have evidence of mail fraud, embezzlement, racketeering, conspiracy, and possible municipal corruption." Hearing federal investigators hit Bethany like a physical blow. She lurched toward her home, probably thinking about shredding files or fleeing the country, but Rico's tow truck was already easing into position behind her cherished white Mercedes. "Ma'am," Rico called with a polite drawl that reeked of satisfaction, "your vehicle is subject to immediate impound for unpaid liens totaling $4,200, plus accrued interest and fees." The hook snatched her chrome emblem of status off the ground like an act of final judgment. Bethany let out a sound equal parts banshee and death rattle, the audible collapse of a criminal enterprise. Neighbors erupted into applause that surely carried for blocks. By 8:30 a.m., our street had become a spectacle. More than 60 residents lined the roadway, watching their tormentor's public downfall. The scene crackled with the hum of news lights, diesel engines, and the electric charge of justice being delivered in high definition. Children pressed faces to bus windows while parents filmed on phones destined to make the moment viral. Bethany stood trapped on her porch like a cornered animal, her designer suit damp with nervous sweat no perfume could hide. The woman who had terrorized the block behind manicured hedges and bylaws now faced the fallout in front of everyone she'd harmed, and marked sedans disgorged federal agents, followed by county prosecutors who'd been tracking the case through Sarah Kim's connections. The sight of badges sent several board members scrambling for attorneys while Bethany's face cycled through grief stages at lightning speed. In one final, desperate bid to seize control of the story, Bethany snatched a microphone from Channel 8 and climbed the porch railing like an unhinged politician giving a campaign speech. "Neighbors, friends," she cried, her voice reedy with manufactured hysteria, "this is a coordinated attack by outside agitators bent on destroying everything we've built." The crowd answered with jeers and laughter that echoed through the subdivision. Someone shouted, "What about our stolen money, Bethany?" Another called, "Tell us about your sister's fake company." I wasn't going to let her hijack the moment. I stepped forward, took the microphone from her trembling hand, and spoke with the calm authority of a man who'd rehearsed this day for months. 3 years ago, this began, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "This woman systematically stole from our community while using her office to silence anyone who questioned her." Silence fell as I displayed the evidence that would destroy her life. Bank records showing $75,000 in embezzled funds, documents proving insurance fraud aimed at those who spoke up, and records of sham companies used to launder community money through her sister's accounts. Bethany tried to interrupt, her voice cracking like glass. "These are lies, fabrications by a disgruntled neighbor who has video of you vandalizing my car at 2 in the morning, she sputtered. I cut her off and held up my phone, showing the crystal clear security footage. "Whose signature is on the fake invoices? Who are the contractors who were never paid? Who are the residents you terrorized?" The crowd exploded into applause that rattled windows across the neighborhood. Martha stepped forward, tears streaking her weathered cheeks. "She canceled my insurance with false reports," she said. "She forced me to choose between fighting back and losing my home." Edgar's voice carried the weight of 3 years of suppressed rage. "She buried me under made-up violations when I tried to audit the books. She made my life intolerable until I fled like a refugee from my own street." Helen Morrison, who'd driven back from a new home to counties away for this hearing, spoke with the quiet dignity of someone finally getting justice. She destroyed my garden, then fined me for it. She weaponized my love of flowers against me. One by one, victims stepped forward to testify about years of coordinated abuse, while cameras recorded each account for posterity. With every revelation, the crowd got angrier and Bethany shrank smaller until she resembled a wilted flower in expensive clothes. That was the moment Federal Agent Martinez stepped onto the porch, handcuffs gleaming in one hand and an arrest warrant in the other, one that had been fast-tracked through the federal channels Sarah Kim had spent years cultivating. "Bethany Morrison Kruger," she announced firmly, "you are under arrest for mail fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement, and racketeering under federal RICO statutes." The Miranda rights rolled through the neighborhood like a funeral march for suburban tyranny. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The crowd's reaction was explosive, cheers loud enough to echo across the county. Children on school buses pressed their faces to the glass while parents held their phones high, eager to capture the long-awaited moment of justice. But the real finale came when Rico's tow truck finished hoisting Bethany's pristine white Mercedes into the air. That gleaming monument to her greed dangled like a trophy of poetic retribution as she was escorted away in handcuffs, right past the luxury car bought with the money she had stolen from us. "This is what happens," I told the reporter's microphones, "when communities unite against corruption, when neighbors protect one another instead of cowering in fear, when good people refuse to be silenced by bullies in business suits." The applause was deafening. But even more powerful was the sound that followed: laughter. Genuine, relieved laughter, the sound our neighborhood hadn't heard in years. Officer Rodriguez wrapped up his report with words that felt like a closing chapter to a nightmare. "Suspect is in federal custody. Community threat neutralized. Investigation ongoing." Our long ordeal was finally over, and the rebirth had only just begun. 6 months later, I sat in my driveway, watching children ride bikes and play freely on streets that had once been ruled by fear. The neighborhood was unrecognizable in the best possible way. The morning air carried the music of laughter, not tension. Neighbors waved to each other instead of hiding behind curtains. Bethany's sentencing was everything we'd hoped for, and then some. Federal Judge Patricia Williams showed no mercy: 3 years in federal prison, 5 years of probation, and full restitution totaling $127,000, covering interest, penalties, and legal fees. The woman who once wielded power like a weapon was led away in an orange jumpsuit that matched her new reality perfectly. Her federal conviction guaranteed no early release, no house arrest, no white-collar leniency. For the first time in her pampered life, Bethany faced real consequences, and every day she spent behind bars was justice for another family she had hurt. Our community's recovery exceeded every expectation. The frozen HOA accounts not only held the stolen funds, but also 3 years of untouched interest Bethany had arrogantly ignored. The sale of her foreclosed home covered additional damages, allowing us to completely revitalize the neglected common areas she'd let decay. My Camaro, once vandalized, now fully restored, gleams in my driveway as a symbol of defiance and redemption. The restoration was funded by a community fundraiser that brought in double what was needed in less than a week. The surplus was used to establish a neighborhood legal defense fund, ensuring no future HOA board could ever again oppress residents without facing organized resistance. The new HOA board now runs with the transparency of a public nonprofit. Meetings are live-streamed, quarterly financial statements are posted online, and major decisions require open community input. Edgar was unanimously elected treasurer, and his first act was implementing audit protocols that make embezzlement virtually impossible. Martha, now our neighborhood's unofficial historian, is documenting the entire saga in a book about suburban corruption, already attracting interest from major publishers. Her courage inspired dozens of residents to come forward with their own stories of HOA abuse and intimidation. As for Rico, his towing business has exploded with new clients after his heroics became local legend. Honest contractors across the region now seek him out exclusively, and he's become the go-to expert for legitimate HOA partnerships. His integrity turned what began as a simple billing dispute into a catalyst for community justice and Sarah Kim's legal triumph. It became a landmark case, cited in HOA reform legislation across 3 states, proof that when ordinary people refuse to back down, even the most corrupt systems can be dismantled. Her prosecution of Bethany became a landmark case, setting legal precedents that now safeguard homeowners across the nation from HOA board exploitation. Today, Sarah focuses exclusively on exposing and litigating HOA corruption. With a long list of communities waiting for her expertise, the impact of her work continues to spread since our story hit national headlines. A dozen other HOA letters have voluntarily requested audits of their financial operations. In response, state legislators passed the Willowbrook Act, mandating annual transparency reports and background checks for all HOA board members. Federal oversight of community associations has also expanded, introducing stricter penalties for misconduct and fraud. Each year, our neighborhood hosts the Community Freedom Festival, marking the anniversary of Bethany's arrest with food trucks, live bands, and workshops on homeowner rights. This year's celebration raised $15,000 for a legal aid scholarship program supporting low-income families fighting HOA abuse. The event has since become a nationwide model for communities determined to unite against corruption and protect their residents. The scholarship fund now operates out of Edgar's former home, which the new HOA board repurposed into a vibrant community center paid for entirely with recovered funds. Children now laugh and play in the same place where Bethany once schemed to exploit families, a poetic reversal that never fails to make me smile. "I heard what happened in Willowbrook," she said. "Can you help us?" I looked out my window, children riding their bikes freely, neighbors chatting by garden fences, Martha tending her flowers without fear of fines, and I smiled. "We're on our way," I told her. "Because some battles are worth fighting, and some victories are meant to be shared." If you're living under the thumb of an abusive HOA, share your story in the comments. Our growing legal defense network is here to help. And remember, subscribe for more real stories of ordinary people taking down extraordinary corruption. Sometimes David doesn't just defeat Goliath, he inspires an entire army of slingshot warriors ready to bring down the next giant. Thanks for watching HOA Stories.